And just to kick us off, we thought we would introduce ourselves again as the facilitators. Maddie, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure, not a problem. So my name's Maddie. I use the pronoun she, her, and I am an experienced English language education teacher. Over the course of the years I have taught general English, exam English, business English, monolingual and bilingual groups, as well as adult and young learner groups. And on top of all this, I'm also a PhD candidate that studies identity formation of Irish LGBTQIA plus youth in young adult literature from the 1970s to today. So,
Thanks, Maddie. And my name is Dara. My pronouns are they, them, and I am the policy lead for the Transgender Equality Network Ireland. So we're the national trans charity based here in Ireland, working to advance the rights and equality of all trans and gender diverse people in Ireland. Um, we have a whole bunch of different areas of work. So we work in community support, doing direct support with trans adults, with trans young people, and with parents and family members of trans people as well. So that's kind of through the community support and the family support services that we run. We run support groups and social groups and community events and all that good stuff. We do a lot of education and training in schools, in universities, in workplaces, with other charities, in healthcare settings. Yeah, pretty much anywhere that we can do training, we will. And then we also do a lot of policy and research work as well. So doing pieces of research into the experiences of trans people in Ireland, and then trying to translate that into policy and advocacy recommendations. And obviously, a large part of that is my job. Um, yeah, and so that's kind of, I guess, just to give a little bit of context on us as facilitators. And I mentioned actually not at the start of this session, but at the start of the other sessions that we've been working together and three organizations working on this. So we have Galway Language Centre, and we have ourselves at Tenny, and then we have Test in the Transylvania Language School. I should know what the acronym is. Yeah, and it's been a really interesting project working together kind of across the last number of months. So in this session, as I said, it's the fourth of the series, so it's the final one, and we are going to look at how we can make our English language education materials more LGBTQIA plus inclusive. We're going to share resources that we can use as teachers, or that you all can use as teachers, to make your lessons more inclusive, and then we're going to reflect on what we've learned across the whole workshop series. So just as a recap, for those who were there in the first workshop, we looked at the project so far and the kind of survey that we had done and what we had learned about English language education workers' experiences trying to be more LGBTQ plus inclusive, whether they found their materials to be inclusive or not. And so kind of setting, I guess, kind of setting the stage for what we know about inclusivity in ELE spaces. In the second workshop, then we looked at kind of the broad kind of landscape of LGBTQ plus rights and inclusion across Europe, and kind of what that looks like across Europe at the moment, and what's happening, I guess, in LGBT rights at the moment, outside of obviously the classroom space, but just to be conscious of what students will be bringing into them, and teachers as well. Um, in the third session, then we looked at LGBTQ plus interactions within the classroom, or how that might come up within the classroom. And then this piece is the final one, is about specifically the materials, and then kind of that reflection, that kind of learning piece as well. So hopefully it'll all tie together nicely. Um, Thank you, Patty. Okay, perfect. So just a little final piece for me, and then I'm going to hand over to Maddie. So I think it kind of bears repeating a little bit at the start of the session why inclusivity in ELE materials matters, and why it is that we're trying to do this work and what it means, I guess. Because I think sometimes we think about maybe human rights or LGBT rights as something that exists sort of out there separately to all of us, and it doesn't maybe impact in the classroom. But what we've been really trying to establish across this series is that it does come into the classroom, not only in terms of the students and the teachers' like lived experiences, but also as an exercise in language learning as well. So in terms of why it's important within the materials, I mean, it's really important, I think, that our materials give an accurate reflection of reality, so that our language learning materials yeah, that they accurately reflect, I guess, our lives and the societies that we live in, cultures that we live in, that we're giving students the tools to be able to speak about their lives, to be able to speak about their experiences, and to be able to kind of discuss that with each other. So, making sure that we're using inclusive language around relationships, around identities, around family structures. So that we really are giving students the ability to, yeah, to represent themselves and to express themselves. We also are opening up students for, yeah, discussions relevant to our society. So again, like that it's part of students' lived experience, maybe in terms of their personal experiences or families, but it's also part of the world in which we all are living at the moment, and being able to kind of to discuss that and have the language around that. And then it also gives a very kind of real and dynamic way of how language is used in real life as well. So like that we're not just learning language that is maybe factually, grammatically really correct and all of that stuff, but that we're also learning language that is used how people use it, that we're learning the terms that people use to describe themselves, and that we're being able to use language in a way that, yeah, that's accurate, that reflects the realities of all of our lives and all of our communities. So there's all of that piece around the tools that we're giving, and that we're fostering, I guess, with our students through the language learning materials. But then there's also a piece around like the actual classroom environment itself. And so making sure that we're using inclusive materials helps to support, and to build a safe and inclusive environment for students to participate in learning. So when we treat being LGBTQ plus as a normal part of life and we bring it into the classroom, it's part of our materials, it's part of our lessons, it's part of the language that we're using, it's part of the examples that we're using. It goes a long way to destigmatizing LGBTQ plus people and LGBTQ plus experiences, and treats it as what it is, which is just a normal part of everyday life. And so not only that's really important for LGBTQ plus students and staff in the classroom, but it's also really important for everybody else in the classroom as well, that we're talking about this as part of our normal experiences. Um, yeah, and so it goes a long way towards kind of building bridges and making sure that everybody's able to participate safely and in a supported manner, supported by the teachers. And then it also, kind of building on that, encourages intercultural awareness. So it encourages, yeah, that kind of intercultural work, that kind of bridge building, that kind of working across and different kinds of cultures, different kinds of societies. And it makes sure that our students are, welcoming, I guess, of all kinds of diversity, that students are, again, there's been some discussion in earlier sessions around students, particularly maybe students who are like traveling to somewhere like Ireland, maybe like an English speaking country, and learning the language there, that they might be encountering and interacting with people from different kinds of cultures or different kinds of countries, different kinds of societies, maybe for the first time. And so that can be kind of contained within the classroom. And that's really positive, and that's a really wonderful experience that people can be having, and that we're able to kind of foster and support that with the language that we're learning. But there's also been some discussion over the series about where that can become maybe a point of conflict, and where there might be like harmful stereotypes or maybe prejudices or ideas that people might have, and how that might show up in the classroom, maybe as a disagreement or potentially as a point of conflict, between students, or between students and staff, of course. And that when we bring, and I think sometimes people are worried about that and they want to kind of shy away from addressing any LGBT topics within the classroom in case it prompts a challenging discussion. But we know kind of from our research, and we know from research around the world, that refusing to address something, that's all it does, is it just lets it sit in the background and lets it go unaddressed. Whereas when we bring it into the classroom, we make it part of our normal learning experiences, then it allows for that conversation to happen in a safe and supportive way that can be guided by the teacher. Yeah, and that provides for a much richer learning environment, as well. And that also kind of provides, I think, as well, for the safety and well-being of LGBT students or staff in the classroom. So making sure that when those discussions are happening, that they're done in a respectful way, for everybody, so that everybody's able to participate. So I think there's, just to kind of round that out, I think there's really key points in there around like why it is that we're doing this, and that it's about making sure that people are able to participate. It's making sure that our classroom interactions are respectful and positive. And then it's also about, reflecting reality and giving our students the tools and the language to be able to represent themselves, express themselves, and the world they live in.
So kind of like what Dara started off with, we are kind of just referencing some stuff that we did last time, just as a good reminder and build on. And the thing we're going to start with here is just the core principles or our core principles of inclusive English language education. We stated and decided that our core principles were respect, understanding, and inclusion. So just a little bit as to why we consider these our core principles. The first core principle of respect is basically valuing the identity and the experience of learners from various backgrounds and helping students of any background keep their dignity in the classroom, especially those who are LGBTQ, not treating them as other, but rather treating them as just another student in the classroom who deserves the same level of respect. This also is going to what leads us to allow for this building of a trusting and safe relationship, both between teacher and students, between students in the school, stuff like that. All of that is a really big proponent of this inclusive English language education, and it does boil down to respect. Secondly, the other aspect of this is understanding. So a part of this is encouraging the education towards different perspectives and identities, but also encouraging the curiosity and the openness towards these varying perspectives and identities. A lot of times, if students aren't familiar with the topic or aren't familiar with the discussions of this, they might come in a little nervous, a little apprehensive of having a discussion, and it's really important that we do encourage that education, but also that we allow that curiosity and that openness to come forth, to allow for these discussions to be helpful and productive. All of this is going to help prepare learners for real world engagement. It helps deepen communication skills. They learn how to understand each other, to be open towards each other, and to really come at these situations that they might not fully understand, but be prepared to learn and be educated. And then finally, kind of like what we said a few minutes ago, inclusion, right? So ensuring all students feel safe, heard, and represented in the classroom and in their materials and in their education. Eventually, all of this is there to help empower learners, make them feel like they are a part of that education process, that they are being seen and that they are being represented the exact same way as their heterosexual classmates are, and that they are heard when asking for these accurate representations of themselves, and that they're safe and that they're in a safe environment that welcomes them rather than something they have to necessarily be guarded towards. We were as we were forming this last workshop, we were really thinking about kind of explaining when we're creating these inclusive materials, what kind of are the do's and the don'ts, but what's important is that we didn't want to create these do's and don'ts lists that ends up kind of making it so scary to even want to try. So what we've decided to do was kind of make a list of things to avoid when creating LGBTQ inclusive materials. So the first one that we decided was tokenism. That if you're not familiar with what that means, it's basically just the limited representation of an identity, specifically in this case of LGBTQIA plus individuals. We oftentimes see it in cliche movies or plot lines in books and TV shows where there's the one LGBTQ friend. They tend to be called they're the one person there that is a part of that storyline, and then a lot of times people are like, check mark, we're done. There's that box ticked. And by doing that, you're actually you can cause students of the community to feel like you're just being a little bit superficial with it, that you don't really understand, or you don't really, or that they're not really fully being included, that it's just like, oh, if I reference, you're fine kind of thing. So oftentimes, and if you feel free, guys, as we go through this to try to come up with solutions of your own for each of these, it would be great. For us, it's like make sure there is more than one, right? Obviously, with tokenism, if it's rather than just the one individual, maybe have a few kind of stretched out over some lessons, over a certain topic. Don't have one chapter or one with one lesson be the one that is the representation of the LGBTQIA plus individuals, but rather have it spread out naturally. Another thing that we want to avoid is the over reliance on stereotypes. The using of cliches or other harmful stereotypes is something that has happened throughout history towards the LGBTQ community, and it still is done today in a lot of media. And by seeing these hurtful and harmful stereotypes and cliches, not only are we continuing to reinforce this and reinforce these stereotypes and cliches to potentially students who are just learning of the community and learning how to interact with the community, but we're also continuing to alienate those of the community as being seen as other in this cartoon and stereotypical viewpoint of these people. And then the last one on this slide that we want to avoid is outdated language. Basically, that's just using terms that are no longer considered appropriate. As more and more rights and more equality and social acceptance has happened, the terms and language and phrases being used that are directed towards this community have changed quite drastically in the last 5-10 years, because people are able to use the terms that they feel comfortable with, and we're seeing words be taken back and used as empowering words that might have once been used as a word of hatred or a word of othering. To continue to use these outdated terms, either just in general or using words in their original meaning that were hurtful, can be harmful and confusing to students. It's confusing students as to what is and is not okay to use towards people of the community, but it can also be harmful to students because you're putting those stereotypes, you're putting those wrong language and vocabulary into their mind. So when they go out and they're trying to interact, they might end up accidentally using these terms in the wrong situation. And also, if you have students who are of the LGBTQ community or are very familiar with it, it could put credibility into question as to if this material is actually credible, if it's one that they can trust and use. And it could, if it happens often enough, it could also seep into other aspects of your lessons and of lessons that are being used with these materials that are incorrect and using this outdated language. Okay, so the other ones that we have decided that we wanted to mention that is important to avoid, kind of similar to tokenism and jumping off of that, is the isolated content aspect. Basically, this is only teaching LGBTQIA plus inclusive material during a certain chapter or a certain week. We all know what June is. Happy Pride Month. Hope everyone's enjoying and has a great, wonderful Pride Month. But a lot of times what we see and what we have been seeing is this rainbow washing basically happen during June, where all of these companies and all of these groups and stuff like that don't normally do anything pro LGBTQ, they're not there encouraging equality and encouraging inclusion and equal and helping pass legislation protecting the community, suddenly all have shirts with rainbows on them, and anything that they can put a rainbow on, they're putting a rainbow on, and they love glitter and they love all those things. And not to say that we don't love rainbows and glitter. Some of us do, but it's important not to just fall into this rainbow washing thing of, oh, this week is LGBTQ week. That's the week we do this. This week in June, all of our units and all of our lessons are LGBTQ inclusive. Or this one chapter, this is the one that we make LGBTQ inclusive. We want to really see it happen naturally because it's a part of the natural world and it's a part of society. It's all around. It's not something that only not everybody who is a part of the community is suddenly awoken and becomes LGBT in the month of June. It's 12 months a year, 365 days. So kind of treating it something like that puts the LGBTQIA community as a special topic, as this topic to be kind of seen as this other and seen as like almost like a cartoon as not real rather than a normal part of life because it pops up and then it goes back away. It's not something they get to see as normal and often and stuff like that. And then the last one is kind of a really touchy subject because it can go both ways. And that's cultural insensitivity, right? So a lot of this is the assuming that all of your learners or the learners of a lesson are going to share the same viewpoint and opinions as you. If you're teaching this lesson or these lessons that are LGBTQ inclusive, it is thought, and it is oftentimes a very safe thought, is that you are either a part of the community yourself or you're an ally, and you see the importance of including this and all that stuff. But you need to be aware that not everyone might share that same viewpoint or opinion. And this can potentially cause some resistance in learners that they don't want to see what the actual lesson is about. They're only focused on that one thing that they don't agree with. This can cause backlash. This could cause them, such as them complaining or putting in complaints or stuff like that. But also, if this is crossing boundaries and you have LGBTQ students in the classroom, this could put students into danger. As we go through these topics and as you teach these lessons, it's pivotal that you are aware of the safety of both your LGBTQ students, of yourself, as the ones who are allies and the ones who are not, and just be aware of that makeup of your classroom as to not put anybody in one particular, especially one particular person or anything, into danger. It might also be pivotal at this point to reference, you need to be aware of the boundaries of both the personal and the social boundaries of your LGBTQ students. Are they comfortable with you using their preferred pronouns and preferred name in public? Are they comfortable with you mentioning or you referencing anything about the LGBTQ community and maybe referencing them? Do they want other people to know? As English language education teachers, we get students from all over the world that have all different family types and come from very different backgrounds, and it is important that we understand this so as to not cause any issues with one or more people here. As we were going through this, we wanted to try to find inclusive course books because one of the things we got told was that that we got in our in the survey feedback almost a year ago, I think, or about a year ago at this point, was that course books and materials aren't inclusive, which is so sad. But Julie, one of the wonderful people working on this project, has done quite a nosedive and a very, very deep dive into researching some inclusive course books that you can potentially find. So this first one is called Existence, and it's 8 LGBTQIA plus inclusive ELT resources. And all the authors' names are below them in case you would like to make note of them. This is a really nice book. It comes with 8 specific lessons, like it says. It's a really great resource to use, pure LGBTQIA+. Underneath that, you see Raise Up, which is a diverse and inclusive view of ELT series. This is really nice because not only are we seeing LGBTQIA+ inclusivity, we're also seeing inclusivity of people with different abilities, we're seeing relationships and families with people that are different races and different ages and different family makeups of like single parent homes and step kids and step siblings and step parents and all this wonderful stuff, all these amazing things that are the fully inclusive and diverse view of what the world is, but we oftentimes don't see it in our course books. So we found those. And then some additional materials that we thought were pivotal or important for you guys to know about. The first one is a really good one. If you are somebody who is in charge of writing material, or you are somebody who's really interested in learning more about these materials, of creating these materials, there's a book by somebody who's named Tyson Sieber, and they wrote the book How to Write Inclusive Materials. You can that's a great one. It's going to walk you kind of through how to do that, and it's going to be great. And then we have the other one, which is it's a good sized book. It's called Queer Studies in English Language Education. And you can see there's a lot of wonderful people that helped write that book. It's very well, has a good index in it as well. So if you're somebody like me who likes to read a lot of articles, you always use that index to jump you off to the next thing, to teach you more and more. So highly recommend any of these resources. In the meantime, if we don't have those books, we got to learn how we're going to make our lessons inclusive. So the vocabulary and grammar ones are the ones that are normally require the least amount of changing. So first and foremost is to avoid gendered language or to teach gender neutral terms, right? So if you're going to teach mother and father, also teach parent. If you're going to teach brother and sister, also teach sibling. But also, instead of teaching students just the word like fireman, we could teach them firefighter, right? So just teaching those gender neutral terms, avoiding that unnecessarily gendered language. When you're using example sentences to either use to show vocabulary or a grammar point, use these example sentences or write example sentences that showcase diverse family relationship and identity structures. So we're talking his husband or her girlfriend or something like that. Just simple stuff like that is going to show that diverse family and relationship structures. And with identity structures, remember, they them pronouns can be taught as both singular and for more than one people, and we need to know that, and we need to teach that. It's a simple one to teach, and it's one of those ones that students, it sounds kind of, at first it sounds confusing to some, but it is actually a very we do it every day and we don't even realize it. It's just a really helpful one for those example sentences there. You also want to make sure you're eliminating harmful language in general. Just be careful. We know what's harmful, we know what's not. So just making sure that our language that we're using in our vocabulary and our grammar, that we're not teaching harmful vocabulary to our students. And part of that is to teach that language that is up to date and to ensure our proper use of vocabulary. Even within discussions in classrooms, making sure that the vocabulary that is being taught is up to date, current, is properly used, and isn't harmful in the definition that it's being given. Then furthermore, if we look at our receptive and our productive skills, these are the ones that we teach other than just vocabulary and grammar. So our listening, our reading, our speaking, and our writing. So receptive skills are ones that might be a little bit more difficult to find, especially because we don't always get to choose our audios, right? A lot of times our course books have those audios, so it might not be the easiest. But if you do have the option to choose a listening audio that does showcase those diverse family and relationship structures and identity structures, is amazing. For readings, again, if you have that option. If not, altering readings to be more inclusive of different identities is fairly simple. Just pop that up in a Word document, change a couple characters, or change some words around and make them more inclusive. It might take you 15, 20 minutes to do that, but that's 15 to 20 minutes that is going to help LGBTQ students in your classroom feel seen and represented. If you're doing a higher level class, it might be important to choose readings and listenings, audios that do comment on current affairs to encourage relevant discussion. So whether that is choosing some news articles that are from recent months, or choosing a news segment that was broadcasted. Doing this can really help create this commentary and allow for students to have discussion on what's currently happening in the world. And this doesn't necessarily, this is something that's just great to use across the board, not necessarily LGBTQIA only. It can be for anything, but it is something that is really helpful and a great way to get inclusive listening and readings. For our productive skills of speaking and writing, use more open prompts. Using more open prompts, prompt something of instead of going like, and that goes hand in hand with the avoiding writing and discussion questions that are gender specific. Instead of telling somebody to describe their mother or describe their father, describe your parents, right? Describe your partner. What do you look for in a partner? Kind of these simple things when we're talking about discussion questions or writing prompts. A lot of times this comes in when it comes to holidays. So like Mother's Day, Father's Day, Valentine's Day. Just remember, you can have these discussions, but you don't need to be the one that prompts it to be gender specific. It's up to then the student as to how they would like to answer that. So if they are LGBTQ, but they don't feel comfortable with everybody knowing that, they have their ways as to how they're going to respond to it. But that way you're not forcing them into a certain heteronormative box. Correct outdated or harmful uses of language in favor for the current and respectful versions. If you hear a student or you hear students in discussion using outdated language, outdated terms, or words and terms that are harmful to the community, just correct them. We all know how to correct students, kind of without drawing too much attention and making them feel like they did something bad on purpose. A lot of times these words might be used, especially if they're learning, might be used not knowing that they are outdated or harmful. So just a polite correction could just put them back on that right track there, right? And encourage students to discuss and be curious. We kind of mentioned that before. Encourage students to discuss, get into discussions, and be curious, but also make sure that students, while they're doing this, are being respectful of others. So good monitoring, kind of walking around, making sure you're hearing and listening, and just making sure that no one student is being ganged up on or potentially being hurt verbally as a result of who they are and their identity.